Metavision and Emperor Eye, two of the most iconic ocular abilities in sports anime, both being game changers for the respective players who use them, leading to utter dominance on the field or court. Today we are going to compare these two abilities to find out which is superior. What we're going to need to do is examine these abilities in a vacuum, since the characters who use them greatly influence how powerful the abilities are. Starting with the Emperor Eye, the visual ability utilized by Akashi Sejiro that allows Akashi to see the future. How Akashi is able to accomplish this is perceiving every slight movement of the human body. Breathing, pulse, sweat, muscle contractions, everything about the opponent allows Akashi to see future movements. The Emperor Eye essentially allows the user to see everything about the opponent in such vivid detail, with this culminating in a vivid image of future movements. It's described that with this ability, Akashi makes everyone powerless on offense and defense. That's really just what this power can do. Akashi couples this with skills such as his ankle break for maximum disrespect. If you're unfamiliar with an ankle break, it causes a defender to lose their balance, stumble, or fall. Players use deceptive moves like crossovers, step backs, or spins to manipulate the defender's movements, creating an opportunity to drive to the basket or shoot. The term "he got his ankles broken" should be pretty straightforward with this. What Akashi does is he crosses over the instant the opponent puts their center of gravity on their pivot legs, this being an easy feat for Akashi who can see the future. Defensively, it's also a flawless ability, locating momentary gaps in the opponent's game, such as Akashi vs Midorima, where even from a triple threat position, which is the most fundamental stance in basketball, from this position one can either shoot, pass, or dribble. It's the starting point for any play you want to make. No matter how quick the player is, he's going to find himself in that position. Akashi's Emperor Eye capitalizes on that second. These are within the realm of possibility, at least for other players in the Generation of Miracles, such as Kais, who is able to replicate Akashi's ankle break and capitalize on the momentary stationary position of the triple threat stance, just like Akashi, despite only using a copy of the Emperor Eye. And we know there is a difference, despite the fact that Kais can use the Generation of Miracles moves, as Akashi himself makes a point to delineate between his Emperor Eye and the faux version that Kais used after he performs the ankle break, not just on Kagami, but Kagami in the zone. These are not the upper limits for the Emperor Eye, and there are plays that can exceed what I just discussed. However, we have to make it clear that a lot of plays achieved in Kuroko no Basket are attributed to Akashi plus the Emperor Eye, and not just the ability itself. Even if someone else were to have the Emperor Eye, they wouldn't be able to use it like this. Akashi isn't invincible because he has the Emperor Eye, but rather how he uses it. This being showcased as even subtly Akashi can defeat characters like Kagami in the zone, even when he's seemingly overwhelmed, by precisely slowing the speed of his exchange with Kagami to the point that he'd miss his Meteor Jam, being cognizant of the location, height, angle, time of his jump, along with the ball control after the jump needed to perform it. Akashi with his ability disrupts all of this, so there are a lot of examples where Akashi himself is just utilizing the Emperor Eye in a manner that is not staple to the ability itself. So we do want to take some of what Akashi does with a grain of salt, or some of his higher end plays, as not everybody who's going to have the Emperor Eye is going to be able to perform them as Akashi does, like I just mentioned. And I should make it clear, Akashi's Emperor Eye is more impressive than other variations like Kais's perfect copy, as we have characters like Kagami who have beaten or had experience with the Emperor Eye, just outright losing to Akashi's Emperor Eye even while in the zone. I mentioned the zone before, but the zone, for anybody not aware, is when a player or prodigies are able to utilize all of their potential in a game. Synonymous with flow state in a lot of media, and in the context of Kuroko no Basket, even top players that are focused without the zone can only utilize 80% of their potential during a game. In short, it's a performance buff in a similar way Blue Lock characters perform better feats in their flow state and are performance towards a difficult challenge reaching peak performance. Even putting aside Akashi's own physical abilities, which are impressive but just not up to the same standard of the Generation of Miracles, his Emperor Eye just performs better by every viewable metric. There actually is more to the Emperor Eye and what somebody could do with it off of some of Akashi's later showings, but I want to take this moment to segue into the Metavision part of the discussion and see how it stacks up. Metavision is the ocular ability introduced during the Neo Egoist League of Blue Lock. This ability is the next step up from high-level spatial awareness, which is what Isagi used earlier on in Blue Lock to analyze the entire field and give him a vast understanding of the game itself, ranging from not only the opponents but to his teammates as well. Where Isagi modifies this is basing it off Kaiser's movements, who isn't even looking at the ball. He's turning his head to take in the full picture of the field, so rather than focusing on the ball, he's expanding his field of view to take in the entire field. More precisely, what Kaiser, or the player with Metavision, does is use their peripheral vision to constantly give themselves an endless stream of information, using that overwhelming mass of data to calculate the optimal point that nobody has grasped yet. viewing the field from a higher dimension, a fourth dimensional view so to speak, that transcends 2 and 3 dimensional thought patterns. To elaborate more on what this means, what's happening on the field or the field state of play can be considered the second dimensional view. Then, visualizing the various players and the sorts of plays you want to make is the third dimension. But what Kaiser and Isagi in turn do is see everything from an even higher dimension. He watches the players trying to make their ideal plays while looking for their mistakes and openings to better destroy them. Kaiser's eyes and brains give him a fourth dimensional view, a god level view that transcends those 2 to 3 dimensional thought patterns. This also isn't a feat anybody can accomplish, as it requires spatial awareness, power of insight, and soccer IQ. The effects of Metavision are almost instant, as there's a dramatic increase in quality from Isagi's movements, going from being a rather irrelevant piece in the Manshine City game to being the eye of the hurricane. The ability also is suited to generally any area of the game, as midfielders and game markers can use this sensation to control the field and make passes or shots from a higher plane. In terms of when you have ball possession, it pretty much has universal uses. It's very useful in using teammates or other players to get past defenders, whether that be passing to them or using them as bait. Also very prudent in micro exchanges between singular players, as Isagi, even against individually superior players, is able to pinpoint the exact interval to when he should intervene and steal the ball. Most importantly though, this is good since it helps the user map out routes to the goal using the culmination of information they constantly gather, defensively accomplishing the same thing by using the same info to block opposing players' passes or shots. It changes the entirety of the game to where it's almost a match of shogi, with both players attempting to manipulate the field to their whim and capitalizing on that final point to score the goal. So how do these two generally compare? The way I view this discussion is that Metavision works far better in a general macro sort of sense, as not only is it being used in reference to 22 players total in a soccer game compared to Kuroko, where there is a maximum of 10 players on the court at the same time, or 21 and 9 not including the control group character we're talking about, pretty much means that on top of Metavision users using the ability in a much more grand scheme, also are keeping track of far more players compared to a basketball game, where the ability would still be good but wouldn't be quite as useful considering the fact that there's far less players. Unless you're Kuroko himself, it's actually not that difficult, especially in the context of Kuroko, to keep track of characters on the court, which means this ability really wouldn't be suited to it and works a lot better in these larger team-based games. Metavision just works to combat team play far better, whereas Emperor Eye is much more suited for a 1v1 situation or one-on-one encounters. This is rooted in how the Emperor Eye functions, in that you can only see the future of one player at a time. The Emperor Eye, however, through this future sight is showcased to compensate for physical gaps between players, as even when Akashi's in the zone, someone like Aomine, the ace of Generation of Miracles, would still be a superior scorer, or Murasaki Bara, the center of the Generation of Miracles, would still be a better defender, but due to the Emperor Eye, as fast as they run or as high as they jump, when Akashi's reflexes kick in, after seeing what they're going to do, they just can't fight his foresight. In order to break the Emperor Eye, you must bring your own Emperor Eye to the table. This becomes relevant the 2 times the Emperor Eye is outright defeated. Before I touch on that though, compared to Metavision, this isn't really offered, as you can make a read based on information you've accumulated, which will just always be inferior to a read based on actual movement rather than previously based information. An example of this is Isagi being able to see the movements of Kaiser versus Chris Prince, yet lacks the physical ability to keep up with them, compared to someone like Akashi, who wasn't able to beat Murasaki Bara in a 1v1 until his Emperor Eye awoken. With that being said though, this is very interesting since Metavision also compensates for what the Emperor Eye lacks. We see Kuroko and Kagami overtake the Emperor Eye due to Kuroko's predictive movements, specifically with Kagami, someone who he spends serious time building trust with and playing with. This is described as a quasi-Emperor Eye, one that reveals his teammates' futures. Basically, Kuroko moves quicker to block Akashi's way due to seeing how Kagami and only Kagami was going to move a little further than Akashi, so this only works with Kagami and not in a general sense. Ironically, there's a similar situation in Blue Lock where Isagi is able to get around Nico's own form of Metavision, who is really only focusing on Isagi and the ball, Isagi capitalizing this by using Raichi to narrow Nico's field of view, in turn allowing Isagi to steal the ball away. So these two actually do have different weaknesses. In terms of Metavision, on top of just being able to be caught off guard if you're not paying attention to certain players, if someone exists outside your calculations or you don't have previously established data for them, you just won't be able to deal with them in the same sense or accurately predict their movements. This is why someone like Rinatoshi is so formidable, especially when he enters his flow flow state, as Isagi wasn't able to visualize what Rin is going to do. Isagi also is a bit of an outlier, and a lot of what he does accomplish with Metavision, most characters wouldn't be able to use, as what he's able to do is categorize people into ego types, which further helps this analysis in predicting what they are going to do. And the Emperor Eye can be used in avenues such as passing to teammates optimally. This still is a one-on-one type of situation, as you're only going to pass to one person at a time in basketball, compared to Metavision, which just operates as a continuous UAV on the field, allowing you to analyze everybody on the field, analog everything about them, and use that to create a supreme route to victory. Looking at it in the context of both of these series, the Emperor Eye would be useful in both of them. Pretty much in soccer, you are going to have a lot of 1v1 matchups where you're trying to maintain ball possession, in which the Emperor Eye could be very useful. Something similar to this is Aiku and his ocular ability, where he can gauge a player's statistics, even putting what they're going to do into percentages. Not quite as strong as Akashi's Emperor Eye, but still very valid, whereas Metavision in basketball wouldn't be quite as useful. Not saying it wouldn't be useful at all, but the only instance where I would see it useful is when two Metavision users collide with each other or cross their visualizations, like Isagi and Hiyori, which is a lot closer to Kagami entering the true zone and defeating Rakuzan, as the entire team was synchronizing off of one glance of eye contact, which is much closer to the reflex goals that characters have in Blue Lock, where they don't even need to be looking at each other. While the Emperor Eye is a better standard ability for these close encounters, I will say Metavision, depending on the user, does have the potential to surpass it, as you can create a visualization or a future beyond what the Emperor Eye sees with its one player limitation. So basically what we have is the ability to almost guarantee beat one person in whatever you're playing in a 1v1 situation, or being able to process info from 21 other players to construct your own road to victory. Both have their uses, however I think Emperor Eye works in both series, whereas Metavision wouldn't work quite as well in Kuroko no Basket. Not in not being able to track the lesser amount of players, but more so the ability itself not being quite as effective, since in the context of both these series there's far less of a playmaking factor, as it's much more of a condensed game. Like Isagi appearing at the end of someone's streak in Blue Lock and stopping their shot or stealing the ball for his own goal isn't something that would happen in basketball or in Kuroko no Basket. He just wouldn't be appearing in front of somebody to block their shot. It just doesn't fundamentally work the same way. So while both abilities have their nuances, the main deal with Metavision is that you're going to be utilizing and perceiving the entire field like a continuous UAV in order to capitalize on everybody's movements and score the finishing goal for yourself or defend against it, compared to the Emperor Eye, which is just 1v1 future sight, pretty much going to be able to beat anybody you come across, unless you're being contested by another Emperor Eye or players who are able to sync up to a degree that they're able to outmaneuver the Emperor Eye itself. With that all being said, what about the completed Emperor Eye? How does that stack up, since what we've been talking about is an inferior version? In Kuroko no Basket Last or Extra Game, the movie and 8-chapter epilogue to Kuroko no Basket, the Generation of Miracles faces off against Team Jabberwocky, an American team of phenomenal players, where Akashi is met with someone possessing the same eyes as him in the form of Nash Jr. and his Belial Eye. It's revealed that the Belial Eye is not only exactly like the Emperor Eye, but superior, both abilities being cut from the same cloth, so to speak, but when the prospect of them being equal comes about, Akashi notes directly that Nash's ability exceeds his own. The main difference between the two being that the Emperor Eye, like we touched on previously, can only see the future of one player at a time, where the Belial Eye can see the future of not only your entire team, but the opponent's team as well. This kind of overcomes that shortcoming I mentioned earlier with the Emperor Eye, as it wasn't really suited to keeping track of the entire team or everything happening. Part of that responsibility lied on the player. It's noted by Akashi's other personality, the one that had to come back out against Jabberwocky, that Akashi's Emperor Eye is not inferior, but rather incomplete, due to the fact that Akashi is split into two separate entities. After the created personality of Akashi isn't able to defeat Nash with his Emperor Eye due to the glaring differences between the two decide to merge back together. The created personality noting, the court vision required to flawlessly throw the ultimate passes. If you combine that with the future seeing Emperor Eye, you will certainly obtain power that exceeds even that of Nash. Akashi combines his ability to read his opponent's body on the entire court, noting, I will infer the absolute ideal pattern by reading his most minute body movements and gaze into a future even farther ahead of that. So everything I mentioned about the Emperor Eye before, throw out the window. You're now able to apply that to 9 other players on a basketball court, and completely compensating for any and all weaknesses that I mentioned earlier. You have this insane ability that is now extended to 9 other players, which means that it can essentially outperform Metavision on a smaller scale. Even if you make the case it wouldn't be able to track as many players, I would make the case this is still a supreme ability. This is the equivalent of Isagi being able to see the future of his entire team, even if he can't see the future of the enemy team. It's kind of ridiculous, and the fact that this is an individual ability makes it that much more impressive. I guess the only other point I would make note of is that Metavision does have the drawback of being more physically exhausting, as Emperor Vision didn't really have any drawbacks for Akashi. Even in the context of the show itself, the zone is such an ability to where there's heavy drawback. Similar case being with Metavision, at least initially for someone of Isagi's caliber, as it greatly fatigued him and caused him to pass out in his first continuous use of the ability. I don't want to sit here and repeat everything I mentioned previously. I think the completed Emperor Eye is just a step above the regular Emperor Eye and does have a bit of an edge on Metavision, to where Metavision is somewhat dependent on the user compared to the Emperor Eye, which is just an amazing staple ability. If you gave a completely average player both Emperor Vision and Metavision in both respective series, the Emperor Eye user would just have an easier time. So that's the video. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you agree, disagree, why? Which ability do you think is superior? I think there is a lot of context that needs to be addressed with both of these abilities, as they're used in two completely different sports, which obviously dictates how well they're going to perform in other respective sports. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe if you're new here or want to see more of these types of videos, and I will catch you next time. Bye bye.